Let's take you to the High Court in Pretoria, where a full bench has heard Deputy National Police Commissioner Shadrack Sibiya's urgent bid for reinstatement. Judgment has been reserved. He was put on a leave of absence in July amid allegations of misconduct. Newzroom Afrika's Zoleka Qodashe is tracking the story for us and joins us now live for more. Judgment reserved. Zoleka, following quite a spirited performances, I must say, by the lawyers. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Vuyo. That's correct. Quite a spirited fight from the legal team representing Deputy National Police Commissioner Shadrack Sibiya. You remember that he was placed on leave of absence in July, on the 15th of July this year, following those explosive allegations by the top cop in KZN, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Now, we've heard a series of arguments before the Superior Court this morning, throughout the day, in fact. In particular, the source of power that empowers the National Police Commissioner Fani Masemola to actually make such a decision or take such a decision in respect of his second in command. Now, the reason why that's important, Vuyo, is because this has been described as administrative action by the legal team representing the applicant. And as we discussed earlier, that falls, or that process, administrative action, is governed by the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act. And what it does is that it prescribes ways in which organs of state are to exercise their administrative action. Now, the reason why this is important is because if an organ of state does not follow the prescripts or is not empowered by legislation to make certain decisions or to take certain decisions, those decisions can be subject to review. Now, this is why it's important in this particular context, because Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya has asked the High Court in Pretoria to review and set aside the decision of his superior. Now, if the court finds that, of course, the respondent, that Masemola, was not empowered to make such a decision or take such a decision in line with legislation, then that can be subject to review. But also, what has been argued by the legal team for the applicant is that the regulations do not empower the National Police Commissioner to make or take such a decision, and that in that respect, his decision to place Sibiya on leave of absence is unlawful. You remember also that the regulations state that there must be reasonable time afforded to Sibiya to make written representations, after which he can be suspended if those, after the consideration of those written submissions have been considered. But what he says is that this did not follow due process and that the regulations actually do not empower Masemola to make such or take such a decision. They also say that the Constitution, as argued by the legal counsel for the respondent, Masemola, and the SAPS, actually do not empower him as prescribed in Section 207, subsection 2, which Masemola has tried to invoke to say that he actually has the powers as enshrined in the Constitution to effectively deal and manage with matters that involve SAPS members. But it is important, Vuyo, to take into consideration the administrative action argument by the applicant, as well as the fact that it is argued that there is no source of power from which he can derive such or can be empowered to make such a decision. Let's listen to the legal counsel for Sibiya arguing this afternoon.
Once the court understands that this is a public powers dispute, the case, with all due respect, falls to be decided in my client's favor, Lieutenant General Sibiya. And the reason for that is because the respondent, the National Commissioner of Police, General Masemola, in fact has no defense available to him, both on the facts and the law. The high watermark of why the stay-at-home order is unlawful is because it did not comply with the mandatory disciplinary regulations that applied to such a decision. That's point number one. Point number two is that to the extent that this disciplinary process runs in parallel with the Commission of Inquiry, General Masimula says, well, it's not going to interfere with the Commission's work. What it's going to do is it's going to help the Commission understand the allegations.
Now, the reason why that argument is important also, Vuyo, is because the question that was also before the full bench of the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria is whether the stay-at-home order was indeed a suspension. And because the National Police Commissioner, Fanny Masimula, says, in fact, it wasn't a suspension, he did not seek to invoke those regulations, those disciplinary regulations as enshrined in the SAPS Act. And so, therefore, it is irrelevant whether he should have invoked those regulations. But of course, judgment has been reserved and parties are now awaiting judgment, Vuyo.
Zoleka Qodashe, who's been tracking that story for us. A very interesting one indeed.